Today, we are cracking open a case file that's literally thousands of years old. Our crime scene? The ancient temple. And our mission is to solve a complex legal mystery from the Talmud where one tiny little mistake could potentially bring the whole sacred ritual crashing down.
Okay, so let's set the scene. Picture this. You're in the ancient temple in Jerusalem. A critical sacrifice is underway, one of the most important procedures imaginable. But then, a priest makes a small error. And the question that drives this entire investigation is simple. Is it all ruined? Is the whole thing invalid now?
To get to the bottom of this, we first need to understand the fundamental rule of our crime scene. And it all comes down to the blood. So there's this key procedure. It's called conveying, or halacha. It's pretty straightforward. The priest has to carry the sacrificial blood over to the altar. But here's the catch, and it's a big one. There is a strict, non-negotiable rule. He has to do it on foot. He has to walk. This right here, this is our foundational clue. It's a ruling from the great sage Rabbi Yochanan. And he's not mincing words. He says, look, if the priest carries the blood but doesn't use his feet, let's say he just passes it hand to hand, then it's as if the conveying never even happened. It just doesn't count.
So, what happens if a priest actually breaks this rule? Does that mistake permanently wreck the offering? Or is there some way to fix it? This is really the heart of the whole investigation.
And with that question, the detectives of our story, the sages of the Talmud, get to work. They start digging through the ancient law books, hunting for any precedent, any clue that might tell them if this kind of error can be undone. Okay, so their first piece of evidence looks pretty promising. They find this case where a qualified priest, he collects the blood, but then he hands it to someone who is unfit to do the service. And the law says the unfit person should just hand it right back. So you'd think, aha, there's our answer. The mistake is fixable. But not so fast. This lead turns out to be a total dead end. The sages point out a really clever distinction. In this particular case, see, the unfit person was standing farther away from the altar. So when the blood was passed to him, it wasn't actually moving towards the altar. So technically, no improper conveying happened at all. The clue is dismissed. Case closed on that one. Then, another statement from our key witness, Rabbi Yochanan, surfaces. And this one is even stronger. This time, he doesn't just say it's not conveying. He says it renders the whole offering unfit. Now that one word, unfit, that's a game changer. It implies the mistake is permanent. It disqualifies the entire sacrifice. And for a moment, it really seems like the case is solved. But just when you think the verdict is in, bam, a bombshell piece of evidence emerges from a completely different law, and it seems to contradict everything we just thought we knew. Get this. It's a direct quote from another teaching. It says that if the secret blood spills onto the floor and a priest gathers it back up, it's still totally fit for the sacrifice. Now, this is a huge problem for our theory, right? Because spilling blood is definitely not conveying it on foot. But the mistake is clearly correctable. So here's the million-dollar question. How can both of these things be true? On one hand, you have Rabbi Yochanan saying an improper conveyance makes the offering permanently unfit. But on the other hand, this law says spilled blood can be salvaged. So the sages have a real contradiction on their hands, and they have to figure it out. And this is where the sages get incredibly creative. I mean, to try and make these two rulings fit together, they start brainstorming these, well, you gotta admit, they're pretty wild scenarios. They're like, well, maybe the floor was sloped just so, and the blood only flowed away from the altar. Or maybe it spills into a little hole and just didn't spread. Or, and this one's my favorite, maybe the blood was just too thick to go anywhere. I mean, these theories are clever for sure, but do they really hold up? Are these really the kinds of one-in-a-million loopholes that a universal law would be based on? In the end, nope. The sages reject all of them. Their logic is you can't base a fundamental law on such rare, convoluted, and frankly unlikely situations. It just doesn't make any sense. So this leads them to the simplest explanation, which, is usually the right one. They conclude that the case of the spilled blood proves it. An improper conveyance can be corrected. And boom, just like that, Rabbi Yochanan's stricter ruling gets overturned. This is a major breakthrough in the case. So with that first mystery solved, the investigation pivots to a related, but even trickier question. This time, it's about the priest's intent during the act.
And this is where the story takes a really weird, almost comical turn. Someone floats a new theory. They say, okay, let's think about two types of conveying. You have lesser conveying, that's just moving the blood by hand when you're already right at the altar, and greater conveying, which is actually walking it over a distance. The theory goes that having an improper intent only ruins the sacrifice in the lesser case, the little hand movement. And how does this brilliant new theory land? Well, the text literally says, they laughed at this statement in the West. Scholars in another region just heard this idea and laughed. I mean, they just straight up laughed at it because they immediately spotted a massive, gaping hole in the logic. And their counterargument is just genius in its simplicity. They bring up the bird offering. For that particular sacrifice, the priest kills the bird directly on the altar. The blood goes straight from the bird to the altar. There is no lesser conveyance, no hand movement at all. So they ask, when could the priest possibly have the improper thought that's supposed to disqualify it? The whole thing is instantaneous. It proves that the theory just doesn't work. So why were the scholars in the West really laughing? Was it just because of that logical flaw? Well, the final reveal of our detective story solves the entire puzzle in a way that nobody saw coming. The real joke was that the entire report was completely backward. It turns out the sages in the West were laughing because the whole premise was just a big mistake. Two other scholars show up and clarify that the messenger who brought them the theory, he got the entire thing wrong. So let's set the record straight. Here's the corrected verdict. The real debate was never about the little hand-to-hand movement. At all. The actual argument was whether improper intent matters during the greater act, the walking of the blood to the altar. The entire investigation was kicked off by a simple, hilarious mix-up. When you step back, this whole detective story shows you that the Talmud isn't just some ancient book of rules. It's this incredible testament to the power of logical reasoning. And it leaves us with this final thought. What does this intense, almost relentless focus on getting the logic right, testing every theory, imagining every wild scenario, even correcting for misheard reports, what does that reveal about the very nature of building a just and truthful world?